Hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, March 3rd, 2025 at 5:15 p.m. in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of setting a public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2026 tax rate.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for March 3rd, 2025. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted but will be accepted during the March 25th, 2025 public hearing. You may also contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council contacts. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel. Sprank.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
And City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you. Our set public hearing for tonight is for the proposed fiscal year 2026 tax rate in dollars and taxpayer statements.
All right, and I'll need a motion to kick us off here. Ms. Farber.
Yes, I move that we receive and file, adopt the resolution, and set the public hearing for March 25th.
Second by Sprang.
Got a motion by Farber and a second by Sprank. Mike.
Thank you. And I have a memo which I'm going to read, and then I have a short PowerPoint presentation. Chief Financial Officer Jennifer Larson is recommending establishment of the fiscal year 2026 maximum property tax rate, and that a March 25th, 2025 public hearing be set for the establishment of the proposed fiscal year 2026 tax rate in dollars and taxpayer statements. At the March 25th, 2025 public hearing, the only options available to the City Council are to approve the amount of the proposed fiscal year 2026 tax rate in dollars as established at the March 3rd special meeting, or to decrease it. In 2025, the city levied for $28,233,757 in property tax revenue to support the general fund. And in fiscal year 2026, the budget guidelines would levy for $29,861,901 in property tax revenue to support the general fund. The fiscal year 2026 budget guidelines call for a 1.38% increase in the property tax rate, which increases the property tax rate from $9.9264 in fiscal year 25 to $10.0637 in fiscal year 26, which would be a 3.9% or $33.33 tax increase for the average Dubuque homeowner, an increase in property tax for commercial of 1.9% or $60.91, and an increase for industrial properties of 1.73% or $81.55. Since 1989, the average homeowner has averaged an annual increase in cost in the city portion of their property taxes of 1.45%, or about $9.28 a year. If the state had been fully funding the homestead tax credit, the increase would have averaged about $6.62 a year. For the proposed fiscal year 2026, Dubuque would have the lowest property tax rate as compared to the 11 largest cities in the state of Iowa with a population greater than 50,000 population. The highest rated city, Waterloo, would be 119% higher than Dubuque's rate, and the average of the other 10 cities is 54% higher than Dubuque. Dubuque's recommended fiscal year 2026 property tax rate is $10.06, or an increase of 1.38% from fiscal year 25. And then there's a chart which shows the comparison of the other cities. While the property tax levy being approved tonight relates mainly to the general fund operating budget, I think it is important to mention city debt. In July 2023, Moody's Investor Service upgraded the city's outstanding general obligation bonds from AA3 to AA2. In January 2025, Moody's Investor Services affirmed the AA2 credit rating on general obligation bonds. The higher credit rating means the city can borrow money at lower cost and is an outside affirmation of the fiscally responsible decision-making of the mayor and city council. In fiscal year 2025, the city of Dubuque used 33.25% of the statutory debt limit. The average use of the statutory debt limit of the other 10 cities in Iowa with a population greater than 50,000 is 42.48%. This average of the other cities is 27.8% higher than Dubuque, and 6 of these 10 cities use more of the statutory debt limit than Dubuque. A further demonstration of the fiscally responsible decision-making of the mayor and city council. I concur with the recommendation to establish the $10.0637 per $1,000 as the fiscal year 2026 property tax rate and respectfully request mayor and city council approval. And now I'd like to just do a short PowerPoint presentation. So the proposed property tax rate, as I mentioned, is to go from the current rate of $9.9264 to $10.0637, which is a 1.38% increase. And this shows the different categories. So as I mentioned, what the change in the rate would be, which would be 0.14 cents. The property tax asking would be going up by 5.77% or $1.6 million. The average residential property tax would be 3.9% or $33.38. The average commercial property would be an increase of 1.9% or $60.91. And the average industrial property would be an increase of 1.73% or $81.55. When you look at, there's only 11 cities in the state of Iowa with a population greater than 50,000. And you can see that comparing Dubuque's fiscal year 26 rate, that Dubuque would have the lowest property tax rate of the other cities. And you might say, well, a lot of these cities, we don't yet know their FY26 rate. Well, the only one who's really close to us is Ames, and we do know their rate. And so their rate is going to be higher than ours. I guess there's an outside chance that Ankeny's could come down enough to be below ours, but it would be a fairly significant drop. Now, they are a high-growth city, so, maybe there's some potential there, but I'd be surprised if that happened. Waterloo, which has the highest property tax rate, their rate's 119% higher than Dubuque, and the average of the other 10 cities is 54% higher than Dubuque. So if you look at the average annual increase from 1989 to 2026, the average homeowners had an annual increase in cost in the portion of their property taxes of 1.45%, or about $9.28 a year. Now, if the state had been fully funding the homestead tax credit, the increase would have averaged about $6.62 a year. Some significant issues that are impacting the budget. The state-funded backfill on commercial and industrial property taxes continues to go down each year, as they told us it would. They originally had made a commitment years ago when they reduced the property tax on commercial and industrial properties that they would backfill and pay the cities for the loss in property taxes. And a few years ago, they said they were going to stop doing that, and each year they were going to decrease the amount that they reimburse cities until it got to zero. So in fiscal year 26, the tax loss is estimated to be $646,000. In fiscal year 25, it was $808,000. And in the projected backfill for the two-tier assessment limitation, in fiscal year 26, it was estimated $387,000. In fiscal year 25, it was estimated $576,000. DRA lease payments are estimated to decrease by almost $200,000 in fiscal year 26 based on their current projections for their business. And interest revenue, it's increasing from 1.7 million to about 2.3 million. And the fiscal year 26 budget is based on projected general fund cash balances, so remember they're projected interest rates, and then the new banking services agreement, which we have with DB&T. Now, not all of that interest earned is from that banking services agreement. We also do our own investments. The local option sales tax revenue, they're projected to decrease by $21,580 under the current year budget, and 2% from FY25 actual. And that 50% of the property tax, of the local option sales tax goes to property tax relief. The hotel motel tax revenue is projected to increase by almost 16% over the fiscal year 25 budget. And the riverfront property lease revenue is expected to increase by about $163,000 due to the CPI increases on the lease payments. Our franchise fee revenue, so that's with the Alliant Energy and the natural gas. The franchise fee for natural gas is projected to increase almost 12%. And electric franchise fee with Alliant is projected to increase almost 20, or about 20%, based on their rate increase. Ambulance fees are projected to decrease by about $300,000. And once again, to mention, in July of 2023, Moody's Investor Services upgraded the city's outstanding general obligation bonds from AA3 to AA2. That's the third highest rating that's available. And in January of 2025, they reevaluated our bonds and reaffirmed that rating. You look at the city's use of the statutory debt limit. Back in fiscal year 2015, we were at 90% use of the statutory debt limit. And in the current fiscal year, FY25, we're at 33%. And we have not yet completed the CIP recommendation for FY26. So that's just an estimate that we'll still be at 33%. And you compare us to the other cities in the state of Iowa and the use of their statutory debt limit. And you can see there's only 4 of the 10 other cities that are below us in the use of the statutory debt limit, and that we actually use less than the average of all those other 10 cities. We also have healthy reserves. FY26, our reserves are projected to be $26 million, which is almost 34% of our projected revenue. And based on the Moody's methodology, which is different than the way that the city calculates our reserves, we calculate ours on a cash basis, we're at 54% reserves. In health insurance, while we're projected to have a 4.61% increase in health insurance cost, we're self-insured. We're not recommending any increase in the property tax impact because of the healthy fund reserves that we have in our self-insured health insurance fund. And the recommended resolution for tonight is to set the maximum property tax dollars at $29,861,901, or a tax rate of $10.0637, or a 5.77% over the FY25 property tax dollars. So remember, that's the dollar amount, not the rate change. And as I mentioned earlier, the impact on the average homeowner will be 3.9% increase. And then there's a series of public meetings and hearings for the council for the residents to participate. The first one will be the one that you're setting tonight on March 25th, which is that night. You do have to, you're going to establish tonight a property tax rate, and you're going to set a public hearing for the public to give their input on the rate that you've set. And that public hearing will be March 25th. That night, you can either affirm the rate that you pick tonight, or you can lower it, but by state law, you can't make it any higher on March 25th. On March 31st, I'm going to present the budget recommendation to you for next fiscal year, and then you're going to hold a series of public meetings to get public input on each individual department. Those will be April 2nd, April 3rd, April 8th, April 9th, April 10th, April 22nd, and April 24th. And then on April 28th, you're going to have a final public hearing on the budget, which you have to, by May 1st, actually adopt the budget for next fiscal year. And then here's places on the web that the residents can make comments on or contact city council members. They don't have to come to the meetings. And with that, we're ready to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike.
Oh, I do apologize.
No, it's too
Mayor,
late.
there
You're
was
done.
one-
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention. So, part of the state law is that later this week, there's going to be a mailing prepared that's going to go to every property owner in our community. And the information in that mailer is prescribed by state law. And so, as you can imagine, when you pass a state law that affects 99 counties, I don't even know how many school districts, almost 1,000 cities, to make it one calculation for every single community doesn't work very well. And so when the people get that notification, it's not going to say what I just said. It's going to say something completely different. And so based on whatever you establish tonight as the rate, we're going to issue a media release. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read some of that media release to you right now. And it's titled, City of Dubuque Explains Upcoming Taxpayer Statement Mailer. The City of Dubuque is informing residents and property owners that a taxpayer statement regarding next year's City of Dubuque property taxes will be delivered in the coming weeks. Dubuque property owners will soon receive notifications which are required and prepared by the state of Iowa, showing a more than 14% increase in the city portion of residential property taxes next year, when the proposed increase is actually 3.9% to residential property. The taxpayer statement will also indicate a 15.5% increase in the city apportioned taxes for commercial property, when the proposed increase is actually 1.9% for commercial property. The Dubuque City Council will be setting a public hearing for March 25th, 2025 on a maximum proposed property tax rate for fiscal year 2026, which starts July 1st, 2025, of $10.0637 per $1,000 of assessed value. This proposed rate would represent a 3.9% increase in city taxes for residential property, a 1.9% increase in taxes for commercial property, and a 1.73% increase in city taxes for industrial property. The mailing is required by state legislation passed in 2023. The document, which must be mailed in March, is created by the Iowa Department of Management. The calculation used in the taxpayer statement by the Iowa Department of Management assumes a 10% increase in the valuation of both residential and commercial properties from 2025 to 2026. City of Dubuque properties were not assessed for revaluations last year, so there is no basis for a 10% increase in valuations. Generally, only property owners who took out building permits to make property improvements might have increased assessed values. The 3.9% increase to the average Dubuque residential property owner includes a 2.35% increase in Iowa's property tax rollback rate, which makes more of a property's value subject to property taxes. What's meant by that sentence is the idea that the rollback changed and made more of your property subject to property tax was taken into consideration when we recommended this rate. So that the increase to the average homeowner in Dubuque will still be 3.9%. For information on property tax rates and other city fees, property owners, residents, and stakeholders are encouraged to stay informed through the city's budget adoption process throughout March and April, and I just mentioned when some of those are, and that's also mentioned in the rest of the media release. And then there's also, it talks about how you can follow on the web and other things and access information. So I won't read the rest of the media release.
All right, thank you, Mike. All right, I'm sure we'll discuss that a little bit more here as we have our discussion, but in general, types of questions or discussion points do we have here tonight? Mr. Resnick.
Thank you. So, Mr. Van Milligan, is this evening's proposed tax rate the maximum allowed by the state?
No. So we could recommend a higher rate.
Okay, so that's important because I remember we were discussing when these changes took place that sometimes we thought we might have to reach for the limit, the maximum every time just to protect ourselves. And if there was some kind of natural disaster or some other kind of thing where we would need to make some, changes later. And then we couldn't, of course. We can't make any changes past that certain date. So we are not, what was do they say what the maximum rate was? And
Well, I could ask the chief financial officer, but I can tell you that, so when the state in the last few years has made changes in the property tax system in the state of Iowa, they did create some caps. Fortunately, the city of Dubuque has been in a financial position for years where we haven't maxed out the levies that they allow. And so some cities have. And so when the state created these caps, they are in really big trouble. Fortunately, we're not in that position because we hadn't previously maxed out on the caps. But I will tell you that doesn't go on forever, as they restrict the ability for the council to set a higher property tax levy. Probably within the next 5 to 6 years, all the caps will start affecting the city of Dubuque, but they don't affect it today. And while I say they don't affect it, it does affect, and this is getting way in the weeds here, what they used to call the 810 levy, which was the maximum you could levy in your general fund except for things like pensions and health care. And they also had some other levies that you had access to. Now, each year, our access to the 810 levy goes down each year. But since we haven't used those other levies, as I just mentioned, like for health care and for pensions, we're able to use those now. But other cities had already put all of their pension cost and all of their healthcare cost into those separate levies. And so as the general fund levy, that what used to be called the 810 limit levy, ratchets down, they're in a really tight spot. We're able to move some of that money into these other levies. So I think I kind of explained that right, Jennifer, right? And I don't think there's really a good answer to the question of what's the maximum amount we could levy.
Sorry, I'm just trying to put the number quick.
I just know I definitely know we're nowhere near it. But maybe Jennifer will.
while she's looking, my second question would be about what you were just talking about there. And if we were able to send some of these, fact check this mailer right now, would that help with getting good information to our citizens? Because otherwise it borders on disinformation for these facts that are wildly incorrect to be mailed to our citizens, doesn't it? How can we assent to that? I mean, they don't need our assent, I guess.
No, the state's preparing them and not us, and they're preparing them based on the state law. So the Department of Management's not doing anything they're not supposed to do. The state law says this is what you're supposed to do. But I just think when the legislature created that formula, they didn't take into consideration that everybody's different. And so it just doesn't work to have everybody's assessed value is going to go up 10% this year. Well, it's not. So what happens then? What happens then is what's happening here is you end up sending out letters that are wildly misinformation.
Okay, and thank you. Are they going to put some kind of thing at the bottom that says,
They can't. It's the state law. They have to send out that letter that says that. So we are gonna send out this media release, and we're gonna get this all over social media and try and get the information out there that the letter you're getting is not what's really happening.
thank you? Thank you.
Mr. Sell.
Thank you. One of the items that was in the package was a list of the improvement packages. And so it's clear that so much work has gone into coming down to this recommended amount. And my question is, these are all the recommended improvement packages, is that correct? Or is that
No,
not
so
correct?
I appreciate you bringing that up, but I should have said something about this. So last year was the first year we had to do this under the new state law. So last year, what we did is we actually told you which packages we were gonna recommend. And this year, we didn't do it that way. We just told you the amount, if you pass this levy, the amount that will be available to fund general fund improvement packages. And then we gave you a list of what all of the packages are. Now, this is not for you tonight to pick this one or that one. It's just to inform you how much is gonna be available for us to make that recommendation, which you'll get at the end of this month, and how much is actually requested. And you can see that the amount of requests is far, far exceeds the amount that would be available if you pass this rate tonight. So the additional expenses like over $1.7 million, and I think the number is about 800,000 that's available. Something, yeah, so it's about twice as much, more than twice as much is being requested than actually I'm gonna be able to recommend when it shows up on your doorstep at the end of the month.
Anything more, Ms. Rousseau?
No, thank you.
Ms. Farber?
Yes, so I have a question about debits and credits here. So, Mike, as you listed out from the state backfilled losses all the way to the health insurance, the reserves, the ambulance, you listed at the very end, all of the things that we were either going to be positive or negative
Right.
on the year. And if you do the math, it's about over a little $500,000 that we are decreased from last year. But then I noticed that the interest revenue went up from 1.7 to 2.3, so that's about 600,000. So is that kind of how you're looking to balance what we're losing in income and revenue versus the expenses from the previous year, or just basically the differential from last year's revenues to this year's revenues as you put that figure together for this year's number? Did you get my math or no? Kinda?
I followed your math.
Okay.
Jennifer Larson, Chief Financial Officer. So, not all expenses and revenues were in Mike's presentation, so there are other considerations that we have to take into account in this budget recommendation. For example, employee wage increases that have already been negotiated are being negotiated, non-represented employees, those costs. So those will exceed the revenues that you're listing out that are in the presentation, which, end up leading to the property tax increase that is requested.
Okay. So no matter what the increase or the decrease is, we still need to increase the tax.
Correct.
For the balance, and that's taken into consideration from the offsets here, because I'm not sure they're completely offset, as you just said.
Right.
Yeah, because some of them are unknown, the franchise fees, and some others are still to be determined.
Correct.
Okay, well, I appreciated the list, Mike, because that really gives an idea of how the revenue and the income comes into the city, and then what we are using for creating the budget for the specific departments. So thank you very much for that list, and thank you for that explanation.
Sure, and I kind of focused in my PowerPoint on the revenue changes, and as Jennifer mentioned, there's all kinds of expense changes that have to
Sure.
happen too.
Sure, understand.
Oh, and I'm sorry, and Jennifer did calculate what could be the maximum property tax rate, and that's $14 I'll say 31 cents. It goes out to more digits than that. So instead of $10.06 It could be $14.31.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Jones, go ahead.
This is a good proposal. I think it keeps the lights on and allows us to keep the city safe and keep the city prospering. I hate that when we're sitting here, it feels like our state government is against us instead of for us. The citizens of Dubuque deserve accurate information coming in their mailboxes from government, and they're not. They're going to get fabricated misinformation that's harmful to what we're trying to do here, and is going to upset people unnecessarily. That it's just a shame that that's the way that is. I really wish that they would pay a little more attention to the fact that most of the people in Iowa live in cities. Most of the representatives in state government don't. And that's kind of a clash that is harmful to most of the people that live in cities. And this ridiculous law that requires a piece of information to be sent to every property taxpayer that's not accurate information, it almost reeks of being intentionally not accurate information. That somebody's trying to paint a picture about these big evil cities ripping off the taxpayers that just is not true. I'm proud of what we do here. I'm proud of how we get here. The process that gets us from late summer conversation and negotiation about goals, and the hard work that staff does between then and now to create a budget proposal that represents some progress on those goals, and the incredible need to keep fire, to keep police, keep public health, keep library services, keep all the things that we do. Public safety includes public works and the safety of the public on our streets and sidewalks. That's all big, expensive stuff. And to be able to continue to do this with only a 1.38% change, it's pretty amazing, because everything else in my life has gone up more than that. And if you take a piece of hardware that's, kind of useful to anybody that you can go buy in a store and make it special for fire trucks or police cars or public works vehicles, a similar piece of hardware is about 10 times the cost because it's now specialty equipment. The cost of fuel that we pay has gone up fairly dramatically. The cost of every energy has gone up dramatically. The cost of employees has gone up dramatically. And no one's suggesting that we not employ people to do these essential tasks. So I think we've got a very reasonable, and dare I say equitable anymore, budget proposal here. I fully support this tonight, and I hope that we can find a way around the misinformation that's going to be flying around because of that mailing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Resnick, go ahead.
Finally, I just want to back up some things that Mr. Jones has talked about. And then I'm glad that we're holding the line on so many things, because it makes the city council, mayor, city council, make some tough decisions about how we think the citizens' money should be spent. And every year, there are some things that we really wish could happen. The city staff has done their best to determine how best to help fund everything that needs to be funded, and then our goals and priorities, as Mr. Jones said. And yet, there's going to be some dissatisfaction that, we could see how things might be better if we were able to fund this and that. But I for one, appreciate that there is going to be a challenge. There should be a challenge for us every year. Ask some hard questions and come to some tough answers, and then make peace with it. And after all that, I, like Mr. Jones, don't like bad information being sent to our good citizens who work very hard, and they're encouraged to, now they have to make a choice who they believe. This person they voted for the state, or this person they voted for the city. And, it looks like there's a conflict, and people make the most of that sometimes. So that's very tough, and I know that Randy Gale is going to do the best he can to talk about what we're doing here. Again, let's try to make the best of a bad situation. But as Mr. Jones says, I like this, what this proposal is tonight, and it's going to be a lot of tough discussions, and I appreciate the suggestion from staff that we are going to do the things in the best, financially the best we can. So I appreciate that coming from staff, and I intend to support it as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Spring, Ms. Wetham? Yeah, Ms. Wetham.
I really appreciate the extensive work that's gone into already presenting us with the summary of the improvement packages that are proposed. If someone at home hasn't been able to look at this document, boy, it's taken a lot of preparation, so kudos to staff in all departments. Just to, again, say it, these are proposed requests by departments. These are not budget items that we have approved. And where I work, I'm not able to get everything I would hope at my job to make my job easier. Unfortunately, the world just can't work that way always. But I want to have everybody at home know this really extensive amount of detail put into every one of these items. We're going to go through them all, but they're just not going to get all funded. And that's what due diligence is. That's why we are here. That's why we are people of service, to try and be fiscally responsible. And I would concur that it is unfortunate when misinformation is provided to our residents that is a dramatic flaw in numbers and verbiage. And I would ask, when you talk with your representatives at the state level, bring this directly to them, and then bring them the document that we're about to show you and publish, because I think that I personally will be reaching out to my own representatives to make sure that they understand my frustration with misinformation to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jenny, and your whole team for putting this, for what you're going to be putting us, for what we're going to be putting you through, because we like to ask fun questions and run the numbers ourselves, so thank you. And thank you, City Manager, for all this lovely information. But I can definitely agree with my cohorts that I don't like when things are not presented correctly and then we have to counter it. With that being said, so the state mails out that separate document. Are we going to be mailing this out as well?
So actually, the state requires the county to mail it out, but it is the state that prepares it.
Okay.
We could mail this out. I think it would cost almost $10,000, is Randy Gale here? I think between the printing cost of the release and then the mailing cost, I think it could cost almost $10,000 if we mailed out our piece of information with the accurate information to the property owners. But that wasn't, the current intent was to try and get it out on social media. Hopefully the media itself will report on it and put it in the paper and things like that.
Okay. All right. That was my question. Thank you.
So, Mike, I'd like to hear a little more from you about your thinking as you put this together. You and the team this year. I think I want to hear it in the context of, we just said what you're proposing as the rate, and then Mr. Resnick's question gave us the answer of what the rate could be if we just went all out and did that. It's always a choice, is to just ask for the most that we possibly can based on the law. But why not this year? I mean, why keep this rate at this level? What are some of the other factors that we're going to be talking about in these budget hearings as they come up that has you thinking that we need to keep this as low as it is this year?
Well, that's a pretty expansive question there.
We got a lot of time.
Thanks. So every year, we try and be prudent about our recommendation. And, I think it was last year we had $3.3 million in improvement package requests, and we were able to recommend, I think it was about $800,000 or $900,000 of funded requests. And all the rest of them that didn't get recommended were all very good requests. And remember how this process starts is the mayor and city council last August established their priorities. And so then those priorities are given to the department manager and said, okay, what do you need to make these priorities happen? That's how they developed their improvement packages requests. So they were all good requests in an effort to get to the implementation of the priorities. And we try and measure, okay, how little can we spend to actually keeps the priorities moving along? It might not be the ideal amount, and the priorities may move a little slower than they would have with a different amount. But so we try and balance that, and we try and look at the impact on the homeowners, the businesses, and the industries in our community, and keep the increase that's requested with what would be perceived as a fair range. You know, you look at things like the CPI increase and things like that. Then at the same time, you have to remember that the general fund is not the only thing we do. So the property tax levy. So that, sure, the general fund fires or funds police and fire, and I can go on and on and on, but there's things that it doesn't fund. So we have what are called enterprise funds also. So we run the water system. So that's an enterprise fund where when you pay your water bill, that pays for the water system. So the property taxes don't subsidize the water system. We run the, what some people might call the sewer plant, but we call it the Water and Resource Recovery Center. And so when you pay, that is an enterprise fund where all the money that you pay on your monthly utility bill, the part that's for sanitary sewer, that goes to run the sanitary sewer system and the Water and Resource Recovery Center. So remember, besides the center itself, which processes the waste has to get there first through all these hundreds of miles of pipes and pumps, quite frankly, with our topography, to get it to the Water and Resource Recovery Center. So that's another thing that we're asking the residents to pay for. Then the stormwater system. So the idea that you don't flood when it rains is because we have a stormwater system. We have a levee that protects the city from the Mississippi River, and then we have all kinds of detention basins and other things throughout our entire system to protect you, your home, your industry, or your business. And in fact, I think everybody can clearly remember all the improvements we had to make in the B branch, $240 million in improvements, because we had a section of our community that had experienced 6 presidential disaster declarations from flooding in 11 years. So it cost a lot of money to maintain that system. Once again, that's an enterprise fund. So when you pay your stormwater fee on your bill, that's what pays for that system. It doesn't get subsidized by property taxes. And then refuse collection. So we run the refuse collection system. So when you put your garbage out or your recycling out or your yard waste out, a truck and employees come and pick that up. And that's all funded through an enterprise fund. So on your monthly utility bill, one of them is your refuse collection fee. And so when you pay that, that pays for that entire system, including taking it to the landfill and then paying to have it disposed of. And so it's another system we have to pay for. So when you make decisions on this budget, now not decisions tonight, you're only making a property tax decision tonight, but you'll make enterprise fund fee decisions. And so we have to take into consideration that there's going to be other increase in cost for our residents besides property taxes. And so you try and put all that together and come up with what you think you need to make the system work while not creating an undue burden on the residents. So, but then there's the expense side. And we have, when you count our temporary employees or seasonal employees, like our summer employees and things, we have almost 1,000 employees. And one of your priorities for the last few years has been employee recruitment and retention. And one of the reasons that's one of your priorities is because we've been facing tremendous challenges retaining employees and hiring employees. Some positions we've had vacant for years because we can't entice somebody with that skill set to apply for the job. And in our police department, for example, we had almost 20 vacancies, and on basically a consistent basis, it was 16 or 17 vacancies, but varied as high as 20. And we still have, I believe the number now is something like 14 as we speak. And so we negotiated a new contract with the police officers collective bargaining group last year that made some significant changes in police compensation. And we think that's going to help us. The problem is you'd say, well, if it's going to help you, why do you still have what you said is 14 vacancies? Is because it takes years in the way the system works today to get a fully functioning police officer out on the street. First of all, we have to go through a very complex civil service system to even get candidates and have them test and all those things. And then once we hire somebody, they have to go through a very sophisticated training program, which includes going to an academy, we only use 2 in the state. One is the State Academy, and one is the Cedar Rapids Police Academy. And then when they come back from the academy, the employee then has to go through a field training officer program where we have trained training officers ourselves who then work with that officer and show them, how things need to be done. So it takes a very long time to hire somebody and get them on the street. But my point being is there's also an important expense side to this equation, and employee retention is one example. But lots of other costs have gone way up. Insurance cost has gone through the roof. And think about it, we have a lot of insurance on buildings and vehicles and people, liability insurance. It's gone up tremendously, and everybody at home will know so has theirs. Well, guess what? So is ours, and it's going up at great leaps. But I do want to go back then to the enterprise funds. So let's talk about sanitary sewer system. If we expect our community to grow, it has to have the capacity to grow. And to have capacity, you have to create it. And so you have to run sewer pipes to places that you want to see a developer develop. And I talked about the topography. So all of our, they say stuff runs downhill, right? Well, the problem is when you get to the bottom of a hill at our community, then you got to go back up another one to get to the place you want to go to. And so we have to pump the waste all over town. And so right now, you just approved a bid last year of, I think it was $27 million to replace one of those sanitary sewer lift stations, one. And we've probably got $60 million in sanitary sewer work we need to do just over the next couple of years. But before we start feeling sorry for ourselves, I just read Cedar Rapids is doing a $350 million expansion of their sewer plant, and Sioux City's doing a $250 million. So it's expensive for everybody, but it's also expensive for us. And so, of course, we're going to issue debt to do all those massive projects, but you still have to pay the debt back, which means those rates are going to go up. So I don't know if I answered your question, but there's just so many pieces of the puzzle that come into play. Yeah. And yet the whole time you're trying to figure out how can we do this without creating an undue burden on our residents.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you did answer it, and you answered it in a way that I think it is very helpful for everybody to hear, because this isn't just something that you throw a dart at a dartboard and say, hey, there's our rate for the year. You think about this for the entire year as you set after we set the goals and as you start to think about this as staff. And I think it's really important that everybody recognize what goes into this decision, because it is complicated. And it could be really easy to just say, we're just going to jack up the rates and make sure that, everybody, we can pay for everything that we need and go forward and do that. But then if we were to do something like that, it would be a burden on people at a really difficult time. And I think that we all recognize this, and this is why I'm hearing a lot of support for this tonight. And I think, we want to do our part to try and make it so we can continue to make progress as a city, but then the people who live here can continue to progress in their own way, in their own lives, without having too much of a burden on them. Because every fee we have to pay matters and means something. And sometimes those fees do get higher. For example, you were just talking about all the enterprise funds, because sometimes there are some big things to do that we need to think ahead and build out for the community. I think it's great that, I was actually really, really impressed when we received this and this number. And this is an incredible rate to stay at for this particular year, because everything is more expensive for everyone, including a city government that we all own. So I think I do think it's a real challenge that you've answered this in this way. I have a major concern about it, though, and I just want to voice it, because I think we just have to make sure we're facing the reality of it all. You mentioned the B branch, and one of the things about the B branch that's such an incredible story is the partnerships that we created with the federal government and the state government to be able to fund different bits and pieces of that project over time. I'm just going to flat out say that we've never seen anything like what we're seeing at the federal level right now. I just don't think anybody alive today has seen what we're seeing at the federal level right now, which is not just saying we're not going to expand the opportunities for cities to come after grants and do things and projects. We're going to take them away from cities at this point. That's an unprecedented change, and it concerns me, because I didn't expect to be in this position, but we spent the last 4 years working really hard to secure some pretty big grants to do some really important things, and I'm concerned about those grants sticking around. I'm hoping that I'm wrong, and it's just not going to be a problem. And we're going to move forward and move past some of the unrest of right now, and we're going to continue to do all the great work that we're doing. But I'm not so sure that that's the case. And I think as we look at this, what I want people in the community to understand is that we're going to keep this rate low, and we're trying to do our part in doing this. But if we lose the partnership of the federal government in the ways that we've had before, I don't know what our choices are going to be going forward. In the next few years, we could be having some very different discussions here if we're not able to fund the things that we need to fund. Those partnerships matter. This is why government is supposed to function in the way government does. We're supposed to have partners at the federal level and at the state level to get these jobs done. And for our part, we're going to continue to make those partnerships happen. Several of us are going to Washington in the next 2 weeks to be able to have some discussions with not only our members of Congress, but new members of the federal administration in the different various offices that are important to us here and the things that we're doing here. And we're going to continue to build those relationships and get to know each other and make sure that Dubuque stays on the radar for everybody so that we can continue to do these big things. But I'm concerned about the direction of things now and how they're going. That said, I want to get to this, the property tax mailer. This is just math, and it needs to work. And I can't figure out why it doesn't. We need to fix this. We need our state government to fix this. Here's the good news. They know this. I've talked to them this year. When I go to the Capitol and I talk to senators and representatives, they recognize the inaccuracy in this form. They recognize the frustration it causes not just city governments, but the people who live in cities and towns. They recognize that they need to change this, and they have a serious appetite to do so. We have not yet seen all of what's going to be in a property tax bill of any sort this year, but we know that one is coming. I fully expect that a fix for this form will be in there, and it needs to be. It's ridiculous that somebody's going to get this form and think that their tax rate is going to go. I can't wait for the angry phone calls, and they're coming. But I can't wait to have those conversations and say, actually, I got really good news for you. It's not that way at all. It's much, much lower. And I think it's going to be nice to be able to tell people that. Wish we could get that word out faster. Really appreciate our communications department making this attempt to send this as soon as we have this vote tonight. But this has to change. The whole idea here is supposed to be transparency. It's supposed to be able to tell people what their property taxes are paying for and why and how much. And the whole idea is to be transparent about it. The numbers are just flat out wrong that people are going to be getting in the mail. They are inaccurate numbers. We're going to try to make sure that people understand the accurate numbers. We're going to have lots of budget hearings to talk about the accurate numbers. But I'm looking forward to our state government fixing this problem because it's a huge one. So, off the soapbox, with all that said, I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I appreciate the conversation we've started here tonight. We're going to have many, many more conversations in the weeks ahead about this. Do you have any other points or questions? Yeah, Mr. Sprank.
Mr. Mayor, you brought up a good about federal funding, our partnerships and our grants. I don't need an exact answer about this, but I would like to know this. Theoretically, say we do not get the funds we don't ever get the funds for the RAISE grant. I know we keep so much, a percentage of our budget is always set aside intentionally for those funds because we have to have matching funds. Theoretically, what would that dollar amount be if, say, we do not get any funding? Say we're completely on our own. I don't need an answer tonight, but I would like to know that answer. Like, we're completely cut off from the feds. We are on our own. That probably wouldn't affect this year's budget, but probably next year's. So,
Well, I can tell you that the RAISE grant is the one you asked about, and that was $25 million, so.
So we'd be looking at a $25 million gap
Yep.
in one of the most important projects that we have sitting on the table right now.
that's not, but that's one of our projects. We've got multiple projects.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Well, motion here is to receive and file, adopt the resolution, and set the public hearing for March 25th, 2025 on the proposed fiscal year 26 tax rate and dollars and taxpayer statements. So, being no further discussion, Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Wethel.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Resnick.
Aye.
Farber.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. Well, there being no further business in this special session, we will be adjourned until 6:30.